So, a couple questions got asked about our money, how much of the money we recover. So, we end up in a lawsuit. We hired Devin Bruce, who's this heavy, hard-hitting attorney out of Chicago. It's in one of the high rises. And so we received an out-of-court settlement from the bank that allowed her to open this account with one signature and funnel this money through it, and the accounting firm. There were things that should have been caught over this period of time. So that out-of-court settlement was $40 million. $10 million of it went to the attorney, and then the U.S. Marshals liquidated all of her assets. She had a home in Florida, this big, fancy Rockstar RV, a couple properties, big properties in Dixon, and that equated, and they sold all the horses and all that. That equated to about $10 million. So we recovered in all $40 million. We had $22 million in bad debt. We paid that off. We created reserves. We've got something called the Recovery Fund, which is on our website, that shows where every dollar of that has gone. And then we become very aggressive on grants, looking at expenses and stuff like that. So had to keep that story. I know there's a lot of questions. I'm happy to answer them at the next pre-evening thing, on lunch, whatever the case may be. But right now what I want to do is talk about this program overview. It is impressive. It is impressive. So when we look at, okay, I got to turn this on. That'll be impressive as well. All right. Today, Burr Ridge, Session 1, Foundational Leadership, Self-Leadership, Mindset, Values, Emotional Intelligence. 2, we're going to be in Montana, July 31st, Leadership Dynamics. It's going to be about culture. We're going to be talking about the core values of the company. Andy's going to join us. He's going to take time in that session to bring, really talking about culture. Everybody's got a copy of Tuesdays with Maury, and he's going to talk about something with that a little later today. We'll talk about values-based leadership, and we'll really look at what is the culture that we want to create. Again, we've got to begin with the end in mind. Workshop 3 will be here again in Burr Ridge, Courageous Communication. It's going to be around communication and empathy. Workshop 4, Burr Ridge again, Building Effective Teams, Cross-Collaboration. We're going to talk about a deep dive into psychological safety, belonging, purpose, amongst other things. Workshop 5 in Nevada, December 4th, Motivating, Inspiring Others. So we're going to take a deeper dive into coaching, appreciation, all those different types of things. Workshop 6, January 15th, Burr Ridge, Integrity, Trust, Decision Quality. Again, heavy focus with all those things around our people. Workshop 7, Louisiana, February 26th, Organizational Agility and Innovation. And I do know the schedule somewhat, depending on availability and stuff, is a little subject to change on where we're going. Workshop 8, Nebraska, April 2nd, Visionary Leadership Sustainability. And Workshop 9, May 7th, Capstone Presentations, Graduation. So, when we look at the course of this, obviously we're going to have our workshops. I believe there will be some type of a dinner gathering every Tuesday, and then depending on which program and track, that might be on Wednesday. Again, all Wednesdays will be heavy focus, people and culture. The first reading assignment, which will be talked about a little later, Tuesdays with Maury. And then we will explore, my understanding, is portions of the books Start With Why, the Dichotomy of Leadership, and Setting the Table. Some of this is subject to change, and we need to have that agility and flexibility as we move through. There'll be some different assignments. Nothing will be overwhelming. And then the capstone project, I know Marco and the team will talk about that later, but there'll be a project that the group does focused on a specific need within Accel. And I think there'll be some presentations and stuff potentially for that on the final day. So this is what it looks like. This is the schedule. It's all in your book. And any questions about the schedule, the way we're set up? Okay. All right.
Is this an executive program? Can you raise your hand? Just so I can give you guys.
Yeah, and there's a sheet for everybody that talks about some of this and takes a deeper dive. All right, as she's doing this, it's going to be our first interactive activity. I want you to think about who's the best leader that you've ever worked with. I should have changed this slide. Because our people, it's a mindset thing, don't work for us, they work with us. Second shift, you will very rarely hear me say the term employee, because I look at our people as our team members. I think employee, while they are employees, depending on how we say that and use that word, when we say team member, it drives something different. It drives a different emotion within us when we hear that. Okay? So this activity, it's in your book there. You don't have to answer all these questions. But the first step of this is for you to go through and answer some of these questions. We're going to take 5 to 7 minutes to do that. And then we're going to discuss those things in our small groups, at our tables. When we go to that portion of our activity, we need to pick a table boss, somebody that's going to report out on the common themes of great leadership. And then we'll write those down on flip chart paper. We'll put them up. Because this all starts beginning with the end in mind. What does great leadership look like? What were those key components? And then we'll reflect as we get into emotional intelligence of how are we showing up and delivering like the best leader that we've ever had. All right? All right, let's take 5 to 7 minutes. Yeah. No, when lunch is ready, I will not stand in the way of that. All right. Just another minute or so on this, and then like I said, we don't need to answer, each of the questions. All right, so a couple things. So we need to pick kind of the table boss. We need to pick a team name for your table. When you guys are done compiling the common themes and an agreement as a team, then somebody from your team will use the marker I just gave everybody. And this group has this piece of paper that they'll write that on. This team has this paper. Everybody's got a sheet for them to be able to go and put those things on, and then we'll report out. But as a reminder, it's going to start with people at the table introducing themselves, just high-level overview, who they are, where they're at, how long they've been with the company, so we can begin to learn more about each other. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So, introduction of each other, team name, table boss, right? Somebody's taking notes, somebody's going to be the one reporting out, and then kind of work through this. Here we go.
We brought a couple others in from.
I'll get some shots of them also.
Okay, how we doing here? Got a lot up. So, funny story, Roy. So, Scott Heller is the reason, my whole reason for the connection to Accel. Because he was talking with Billy, and they wanted to do something on emotional intelligence. And Scott's like, hey, a friend of mine who I worked with for years is doing this type of work and all that. And so he introduced me to Billy, and that's where this whole thing began. And so I started working with them like a year ago, and then did something in December through HR. They brought a bunch of people in. And so that it kind of evolved from there. But Scott was the catalyst of this whole thing. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, he's a great guy. All right, we need 2 more minutes for team. What's your guys' team name? Okay, you will. So while they're finishing up and putting that on the board, lunch will be served at 12:30. Regardless of what we are in the middle of, when it's ready, we will break for lunch. Yeah, so that'll be good. Oh, and then does everybody have access to their Clifton Strengths Assessment? Everybody got the memo on that? We can access it through our email because we're going to need it for the activity this afternoon, or one of the activities. All right. Okay, there's no one way to get to. Okay.
Which report specifically?
Pardon me?
What report
Oh,
specifically?
it gives you your strengths. It's the results from your strengths assessment.
The all one that has everything in it?
Yeah, the one
Okay.
through 34, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll just say all in the title. It's the first one.
Cool. And then, because we're gonna take a dive through like the top 5. Like you guys will work to really look at that, because I don't know how many people have had a chance to really go through that or not. From my experience, not many.
Yeah.
I know when I did it and
I've
showed up
seen
for So there's a lot of, for most people, there's a lot of really good, insightful things in there, and we'll kind of work through that. But okay, so they're just about done. All right, we are ready. Do we have any volunteers of which group wants to go first? Right here, what is your team name?
We are the BAM and the lefty.
Nice.
Initials, and those two, Jim and Christy, are left-handed.
Okay. All right. What were the common themes from your team?
So the common things for us is a good leader is someone who really gets to know you more on a personal level outside of work. Someone who's always available, lets you learn, and also lets you make mistakes, and it's okay. Honest communication, genuinely care about you, always makes you feel like you're on the team. You feel appreciated, give real advice, and explain the why, and then always listen and understand.
Okay.
And I'm Amber Wills for those who don't know.
Oh, very good idea. Thank you. What is it? Why is it so important? Why is one of the common themes get to know you on a personal level? Anybody from your guys' team?
Well, I was saying I think it builds the trust in that they care about me, they want me to succeed and develop and grow. That's what
What kind of things have leaders done to demonstrate that? Does anybody have a story that sticks out to them?
I was saying for mine that my boss would tell me like, hey, I'm gonna throw you out into the ocean, but like don't worry, I'm gonna watch you, I'm not gonna let you drown, I always have a life preserver, I'm gonna throw it out and pull you back in. So that always made me feel like I had the trust to go out and put myself out there and try new things and be ambitious to kind of go out there and learn, because I knew he was always gonna protect me and make sure I was successful in what I was doing.
So true empowerment, giving you the authority and the responsibility, but being there to support you. And so then what I hear from that is he had your back, or she had your back. He had your back. As leaders, it's so important when our people stumble, when they fall, when they fail, to be able to pick them up, to dust them off, to throw the life preserver. The level of confidence that builds and the empowerment. But what I also hear is you were given autonomy, right? Which is one of the 3 most powerful motivators of human beings, autonomy. Awesome. Who wants to go next? All right.
All right.
What is your name, sir?
My name is Mark Tompkinson.
Where are you from?
Oswego, Illinois.
All right. I was like, I came from my mom.
I might get this thing done here. All right. So we were Team D-Silo, because we're de-siloing and we're from all different departments and we break down those walls. So
Nice.
our first one, get to know you. I think Amber, same thing, kind of personal, professional. If you don't know somebody, it's kind of like walking their shoes. What makes them hit that personal side of it is huge to understand. And then lead by example. So Jeff had brought up he had a boss who basically they were ripping out the hotel carpeting, and he was right there with them ripping that carpet out, get down on hands and knees, right with everybody else. So lead by example, authentic, honest. So Jamal had said, like, he had, a former boss that we all kind of felt like if you bring yourself to work and you're not a different person, then you get to know that boss, you trust that boss, you're very authentic. It's not like one person and then who's this tyrant? You're very confused. Your whole team suffers. Understanding why. So kind of having that understanding of how does this process work? What does the team do? There can be a lot of things that are kind of murky, and if you don't understand the why, you don't understand the bottlenecks, you don't understand the solutions, the problems, there's a lot of issues there. And then they brought up allowing you to fail, but having like reserve or knowing somebody's going to really be back in, not just allowing you to fail and fire. So knowing somebody's got your back, I guess also.
Knowing somebody's got your back. You said something that is so important as it relates to authenticity. And authenticity is a buzzword these days, but delivered in the right way, it's so important. Because authenticity drives trust. And if we're one person away from work, if we're one person at the Tuesday night dinner, and we're a completely different person when we show up and we're on the clock and we're performing as a team, people have no idea who you are. Right? Consistency is a huge component of trust, which is a foundation of relationships. You hear me say this many times through our time together. Trust is the currency of leadership. Trust is the currency of leadership. Without trust, leadership cannot exist. And people trust us to do what we do consistently over time. And a huge component of that, as people get to know us on deeper levels, is are we showing up aligned with who we are personally and our values, the way we live our lives, the way we show up there as we are at work. Huge, huge component. Nice job. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Which group wants to go next? Which team? Oh.
We're the Warriors.
The Warriors. Love that.
We felt that a good leader represents taking you out of your comfort zone, continuing to pull you up, being humble, asking questions, continuing the conversation, and not just providing good answers. Being collaborative during team meetings and allowing for you to bring to the table some of your obstacles and your day-to-day work frustrations to solve together versus just solving for you. Allowing you to fail so that you can learn from that. Being consistent with communication and the feedback they provide you. Pulling you into your capability, which is something based off of also the podcast. Having, instead of holding people accountable, you're holding them to their capabilities. And also providing empathy.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. How many people here, it came out late, I apologize for that. How many people were able to listen to Great Leaders or Great Coaches, the podcast episode? Good amount of people. What a powerful shift. As a leader, are we looking to hold people accountable? Or are we looking to hold people capable? Because think about the mindset that drives the difference. When we want to hold people accountable, we see the world, their actions, their behaviors through a lens of trying to catch them doing something wrong. What a lens. What we look for, the lens we see through, is what we get. That filter is so, so important. It's a critical component of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. But when we hold people capable, we believe in them and their capabilities. We see the best in our people. We look to catch them doing things right. We love them for their strengths and their passions, and we forgive them for their weaknesses. We forgive them for their missteps. I've worked for some leaders that held me accountable. I remember at the police department as a young police officer, Chief Short, who is somebody that did not show up aligned with personal and professional. I've got a good relationship with them, but here's the story. We had a policy that said in the squad car you had to have an authorized drinking vessel. That's in the policy. And it was a Dare mug. And one day, we were short-shifted. There were only 2 of us. There were normally 4. It'd been busy. I'm sitting over by the high school because it's got an open campus lunch, and we sit there while the kids cross and be a deterrent to speeding and stuff. And he drives by. I don't see him when I'm taking a drink out of a large McDonald's Coke. I found myself in his office being yelled and screamed at like I had shot somebody unjustified. It was crazy. We had a policy. Every time you got out of your car, you had to wear your hat. And at times, like literally, you'd show up to an active domestic or disturbance and hop out without it, and he'd drive by to catch you doing something wrong, to catch you doing something that was against our policy. And regardless, the worst thing you could do is make up an excuse or just provide the reason why. And then I've worked for leaders who held me capable, who believed in me, who saw more in me than I ever saw in myself. I never even fathomed the idea or possibility that I could be the police chief. And coming up through the ranks as a sergeant, just before my conversation with the prior chief about his vision, somebody said, "What are your goals?" Right? Mentorship. And I said, I hope one day to potentially serve as a lieutenant. That was the second level. And she said to me, "Why are you shooting so low?" And that changed my mindset and outlook. That's the first time I ever thought about the fact that I would even be capable of serving in that role. How do we make that shift from holding people accountable to holding them capable? Absolutely love it. Second thing I want to touch on from that is being inclusive. It's one thing for us to invite people to the dance. It's another thing for us to ask them to dance. We've got to ask our people to dance. When we have meetings, when there are decisions that impact different levels of the organization, we have to identify who is impacted and make sure that we're intentionally being inclusive. I often talk about every situation has 100 pieces. It's this concept we'll talk about. I'll always talk about pieces of the puzzle. Right? It has 100 pieces to the puzzle. If we're showing up and doing everything we should do as a leader, we're never going to have more than 75 or 80 pieces of that puzzle. It's impossible for us to have all those pieces of what's going on at the front line. And so what's important for us as we drive inclusivity across all levels of the organization is to identify who has those pieces of the puzzle and to be able to get all those pieces of the puzzle, the pieces that are above us, the pieces that are below us in our organizational charts, the people that it impacts, so we can make the very best decisions. And just by people having a voice and us asking those questions, we tell them, we value you, we respect you, we trust you, you're important. Right? Our words, our actions, and behaviors say things to people. Some are positive, some are negative. Great work. Big round of applause. Great work. Who is next?
Our team, I'm Chelsea, I'm the director of traditional film marketing. Our team is a great multipliers, not to be confused with the math team. So the first thing we kind of all led on was leads by example. This person
empowering, they're driven, they're really aspirational, we look to them. Approachable, open door policy, you know, if you ask questions, ask mentorship, and when you're out there doing that. Collaborative, something we need more. Have the attitude, overall with energy, and wants to bring out the best in different people. And then transparent and honest, honest with what they have, honest with what we have, and share that knowledge too. That was a huge thing, which is information sharing, sharing their strengths, their skills, what's going on in their world. Knows the people, they actually get to know their people, they find their commonalities, they know what their strengths are, and they play to those strengths. And then really they allow people just to be themselves, and they embrace that, and they embrace the individuality and what makes people unique and how we can't all be the same, otherwise how does the world go around? And then someone who's steady, can navigate issues, can remain calm, can understand highs and lows, and be able to navigate through those.
Why do you guys feel that transparent communication is such an important component of great leadership?
I think a lot of it goes back to what you said earlier about authenticity. I mean, if there's not transparency and there's not consistency, then you aren't sure who you're dealing with, what you're working towards, or if you're on the same team or if you're working in opposite directions.
That's also trust too, right? It plays into trust that if your leader is sort of transparent with you, you know that you're all sort of going in the same direction and you understand where they're coming from. But if it feels like they're hiding something from you, right? You can't really trust someone or what their motivations are.
A lot of times that people can't be as good as they can be without knowing more than less, right? Like there's things that sometimes you don't need to know until you need to know, but some great leaders give you some advance notice, maybe not with exactly what it is, but just partial to get you going in the right direction, to challenge you, to help you get you to where they need you to be.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. Communication is key. In dysfunctional environments, what we see is leaders will actually weaponize information. They'll weaponize that knowledge, and they'll use that to roll it out and then to create fear and uncertainty in their teams. They feel like it gives them power, and then people have to come to them, so they garner that and think of a safe that they put that in, and they trickle that out. I mean, fear and uncertainty is a great destroyer of trust. It's a great destroyer of psychological safety. It's a great destroyer of empowerment. It's a great destroyer of creativity and innovation. Right? Because one of the traps I have fallen into, and one of the traps I see leaders fall into, is that we think other people can read our mind. We think where we're going and what we want is so obvious that it doesn't need to be said. And that's just not the case. As leaders, there's information, there's conversation, there's different things. A lot of times we don't ever turn it off. But where we see the greatest conflict occur is when we have assumptions that are made. Even when something is communicated, it can be difficult. I'm going to give you an example. 2 weeks ago, my buddy Dave, he runs Walmart Distribution Center just outside of Austin, Texas, was back home. And he was talking about an upcoming trip. He was going to be heading to Minnesota. And he talked about he's going to take his boat up there because him and his dad are going to go fishing. And when he was talking about it, he told me that he was going to take his boat to Minnesota via the Mississippi. Or via the Mississippi is how he said it. And I started thinking to myself, where does the Mississippi River dump out into? And how long would it take you to take your boat from the southern part of the country all the way up to Minnesota? So I kind of look at him funny, and he's like, what? I'm like, does the Mississippi go down into Texas? Like, What are you talking about? And he looked at me and he started laughing. He goes, no, I'm pulling the boat and we got to go to Mississippi first, and then we're going from Mississippi to Minnesota. Do you see how easy, even when we communicate and don't make assumptions that people know what's in our head, how this can get twisted and turned? And that's why as we look at communication, we'll dive into that in future workshops, making sure as we communicate, especially about important things, that there's common ground and understanding. Right? So this idea of transparent communication, giving out as many pieces of those puzzles as we can, and empowering people through information is so important. And the very best leaders are just phenomenal communicators. Right? They have the humility, they have the confidence to not have to garner that as power. Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Well done. Who's next? All right.
All right, my name is Dave Totis. I work in finance, and I'm representing the Bulldogs.
The Bulldogs.
All right, so what do we think is a good leader? We think a good leader, again, a lot of this is the same thing. I think we've got a common theme going here. So again, we believe a good leader is a good listener. Asks questions. Again, always trying to get that buy-in from everybody on the team. Be present and available. Again, be here now for your team. Consistent communication, and again, I'll add clear communication, kind of to the point you just brought up. Again, if somebody doesn't understand what you're saying, we got to make sure we're all on the same page and be clear. Collaborative. Again, be part of that team. Let's work with the issues together. Recognition, and then again, one of the things that I would think is lead by example. So again, are you putting in the same effort that you expect from your team? Are you showing people the way to do it right?
How have you guys, as a team, anybody can answer, does somebody have a story of a leader, let's leave any names out of it, that led by example? What was it that they did day in and day out by example that made them a great leader? The music at the Oscars is just turned on. No, sometimes we're put on the spot. It's hard to come to. But really, it is. Go ahead.
I mean, I had a manager. It was actually an interesting dynamic because she was previously my peer and then promoted, and we had been working very closely together. So it's like, all right, there was some. As she had some doubt, I had some doubt. How is this relationship going to work? But she was truly inspiring. First of all, she worked her ass off, trying to motivate and inspire the team. She pulled all sorts of different levers to try and drive towards a common goal. She was an incredible storyteller, and she motivated, I think, through that storytelling to drive to that common purpose. Clarified roles and responsibilities for people. Everybody on the team knew their role, knew what they were supposed to be doing, and how the team was working together to accomplish kind of that vision that was set. She listened, she communicated consistently. She brought she was part of the leadership team, and so she brought the messages down to us one-on-one, in smaller groups and bigger groups, and was our champion kind of day in and day out.
Wow. So many great things there. But the thing I want to dial in on is she was a champion for her team and for the people on her team, right? Think about the best leaders that we've ever worked for. And it's part of having our back, but it's more than having our back when something goes wrong. It's being a champion for their team. Letting the team know through their energy and their communication, their intentional communication, how important they are, why their role is important, what it's going to drive, the impact it will create. And that automatically inspires us and motivates us and empowers us to keep going. But as I heard you talk about her, one of the things that came to my mind, and whether it was intentional or strategic on her part or not. Again, strategic, whenever I use the word, it's because of a genuine care and concern we have for our people. Leadership's abnormal human behavior, so we've got to be intentional and strategic. We'll talk about that later. But the emotions that she drove within her team fueled positivity, energy, positive emotion. People felt seen, heard, valued, cared for, supported, accepted, and appreciated. The 7 things that every person needs. As leaders, we have to be conscious. We'll talk about this in emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And intentional about the emotions we're driving in our team members. Because we are all emotional human beings. We are all driven by emotion. It's in the neuroscience. Our words, our actions, and behaviors will either release dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, right? Or they're going to release cortisol and adrenaline. We'll talk about that in the emotional stamp later. It's all psychology. It's all science. So as leaders, when I think about the emotional stamp that she was leaving on her team members, it was such a powerful stamp. People felt like they were part of something bigger than themselves, that they had meaning and connection and purpose. Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Do we have one group left? All right.
I'm Tony Flippy, part of the CX team up here in Burr Ridge. I'm on the team with Dwayne from Montana, Marisol from our internal audit department, and Janaki from our talent development. We talked about our team and we wanted to be, and we're the lucky few that we're at a table with Andy, so that makes us Andy's accelerators. It's better than Andy's idea for our team. As we were talking about leaders, we have 4 different examples where we found a few commonalities between them. Starting with someone who has integrity and principles, something they believe in, something they carry throughout. It's someone that's intentional in how they deal with others in their actions and how they communicate with others with their language. Someone holding a goal and a strategy, not just as an external idea, but again, something that they truly believe in and are able to kind of push everything through. They care about the team. They're building relationships with the people that work within that team, people that aren't part of that team that they work with, and people in and outside of the company itself. Take an individualized approach. What is needed for Dwayne is different from what's needed for Marisol. It's different from what's needed for Jack. It's different from me. Each one of us needs something different to develop and become the best version of ourselves. And they have an availability and a reliability. If we need something, they're there for us. If they say they're going to do something or get something, they will do it and give it for us. That's the kind of through line that we've heard echoed throughout other teams before us too.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well done. When we look at relationship building, the foundation of Accel Entertainment, the foundation of our culture, the foundation of our relationships with our customers, with our partners. I would argue that the foundation of building relationships is empathy. I believe with everything in my being that empathy is the heartbeat of leadership. Empathy is the great human connector. Empathy is so important that it is step 1 in the FBI behavioral change model, which is the guide to get hostage takers to release hostages unharmed. And I want you to think about empathy in a much, much deeper way. And we'll dive into it a little more when we talk about social awareness and emotional intelligence later. But on a leadership side, empathy allows us to see through the heart, or see through the eyes and feel through the heart of another human being. Empathy allows us to see through the eyes and feel through the heart of another human being. It allows us to meet them where they're at. It allows us, as we get to know people and build those trusting relationships, to know how our words, actions, and behaviors are going to drive, and what emotions they'll drive in their team members. This model for FBI trained hostage negotiators, the fuel to all of it is active listening. 7% of communication is the spoken word. And people are good at hearing, but not so great at listening. It's one of the most underdeveloped skills that we see. And when we listen, and when we use active listening, it's the energy, or the energy shifts that we're paying attention to. It's the body language, the tone of voice, the cadence. All of these, the facial expressions. All of these things become very, very important. And if we're meeting with somebody and communicating and having a conversation, we've got to pay very close attention to those energy shifts. We will take a much deeper dive into relationship building. Relationship management is one of the 4 quadrants that I use in emotional intelligence. But I want you to think about empathy in a little bit different way. We still need to use it in its traditional form. But it is the heartbeat of leadership. It is the great human connector. It is what allows us to lead people individually and meet them exactly where they are at. So there's one thing that I haven't heard from this group. And that is, great leaders know how to make it fun. How do we have fun at work? Fun is not restricted to our personal time. But how do we make it fun? How do we make it more human? How do we laugh more? How do we have a great time as a team? And so I would challenge everybody in this room to think about, is work fun? And if it's not, take a look inside and say, how can we make it fun? Here's another one of the rules and principles. Go ahead, sir.
Work is not fun anymore. And that's, you guys have heard me say that. It's like, we have to, it's so important. And we've always dealt with all these challenges, but focusing, and all of you work with me, it's so important to enjoy the process, celebrate, have a good time. Those of you who went to Mexico, it's intentional. We should have fun together, because otherwise it's work.
Perfectly said.
It's
Perfectly said. The other thing in my experience, thank you. The other thing in my experience with the very best leaders is that whenever there is a problem, the first question they ask is, what part of the problem am I? Write that in your notes. What part of the problem am I? And I am a firm believer that, and as a leader, until you identify what part of the problem you are and you eliminate yourself from the problem, that we have no business and no right to address problems with other people. We need to take this natural human tendency to point outward and point it inward first. And the very best leaders that I've worked for never pointed blame. They always looked inward. And it was always done in a positive way about what is our course correction and how do we move forward. Such an important part of our mindset, driven and fueled by humility. What part of the problem am I? This has been really good. And as we work through this day, As we work through this day, I want you to spend time, daydream while I'm talking, it's fine, right? I want you to spend time thinking about these attributes of great leaders and the things we've talked about. And I want you to think about, how do I want to show up for my team, and how am I showing up for my team? We're going to go through the creation of a personal leadership mission statement. We'll walk through the key elements of it in the last hour. You won't complete it today. But think about all these things. We're beginning with the end in mind. Who do we want to show up as a leader? And keep in mind, everything we talk about, everything we strive for is aspirational. Right? I will tell you, I have made so many mistakes and so many missteps and would love to get do-overs in different situations, but I'm human and you're human. But as long as our intention is there and the aspiration is there and we show up that way most of the time, that's why these people that have come to your mind and these qualities, that's why they're the best leader you've ever had. It wasn't that they were perfect, but they tried to show up for you in these ways each and every day. So I'll ask you this question. What is the most important leadership skill? Just throw it out. What is the most important leadership skill? Empathy. I like it. Listening. Honesty. Trust. Communication. All the above. Which, effort. Fun. Extra points for you. The most important leadership skill is it encompasses all of those things. And the most important leadership skill is self-leadership. Because we take us everywhere we go. And we make conscious decisions if we're going to show up with empathy, if we're going to listen, if we're going to ask good questions, if we're going to lead the whole person, if we're going to drive positive emotion in our team members. But that's hard, right? Because we all have so much going on, and that's why emotional intelligence is the foundation of great leadership. But think about that. How good of a job are we doing leading ourselves? Because regardless of all the other things and challenges and struggles, as leaders, our microphone is always on. I'm not telling you to fake it and fake where you're at. I'm just saying we've got to put boundaries around certain things and drive the energy to show up for our team and people, and then practice incredible self-care. To have people that we can talk to and lean on. Because we got to take care of ourselves or we won't be able to take care of anybody else. All right. We are going to now transition, and I will send out this slide deck. There was a few things that were inserted kind of last minute, and so there's things I want to make sure we get through, but the day was tight, right? Like the day was tight, and I'm just not going to compromise our activity time, so we'll move through some things. All right. What is the key difference between leadership and management? What is the key difference between leadership and management?
You manage processes that you lead people.
Woo! We're just going to go right to it. Right to it. We lead people. We manage processes. Leadership is where the gold is. We've got to manage our processes. There's got to be a balance, right? But what I want to do today in the interest of time management and self-awareness and identifying where are we spending our time, as soon as I figure out where I said, oh, it's set over here. I want to dive in, and it's going to be a combination of thinking about leadership versus management, but I want to dive in to time management because time is a finite thing. We've only got so much time. Does everybody here agree with the statement that the most important part of our role is to lead people, to create the environment, to create culture for our teams and the organization to be successful? Raise your hand if you don't believe that. Yeah, I know you believe it. All right, so what I want you to do, and I need to hand out, I'll have Marco help me hand this out, a blank one of these. So this is Covey's Time Matrix. And I want you to work for 5, 7, 8, 10 minutes, whatever it takes. So we look at this, we've got what's important. What are your important management functions? What are your important leadership functions? What's urgent and what's not urgent? What are not important? There are things that got to be done, right? What's not important and urgent, and what's not important and not urgent. But I want us to be intentional about identifying for ourselves what are our most critical responsibilities around leadership and management. And then I want to put them in to the quadrants, and then we'll have some discussion around that. All right, we'll have some discussion around that, and then we'll end up talking about some time management strategies. So, get thinking on that. Be clear on those things, and then we're going to identify how much time are we spending on the most important and not urgent things. When you look at the not urgent, there is urgency, but building culture, vision development, process improvement, staff training programs, technology updates. So these are just some examples, and you have them in your book to get your brain going. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. So, 1, 2, 3. You're welcome. You're welcome. Marco, man, I don't think I took enough. I think I gave him the majority of them. Here you are, sir. All right, I got to get more from Marco. I know we've got enough because there's like 60. Yep, I sure will.
These aren't in the right boxes, right?
Well, they might be or they might not be, but I want you to think about your specific role, right? Because we've got finance and HR, we got sales and relationship management, we've got security, IT, the list goes on and on. So I want you to think about your most important roles, leadership and what that looks like, management, what that looks like, and then put those in these quadrants. Yep. Who doesn't? Oh, he gave you those? Oh, did you give him enough?
Thank you.
Does everybody have a sheet? So in Covey's Matrix, and this not important, right? Like checking your email, running reports. I mean, those are things that have to be done, but you're ranking them in a different, maybe you look at it from a side. This is important, it has to be done, and this is less important, but it has to be done.
I think the important and urgent is where impact is made. You have to do the routine reports that are required because they're urgent.
Yeah.
I think the high impact tasks are probably the ones that are at the important.
Yeah, the high impact tasks, right?
Yeah, or strategy or anything like that.
This activity will bring role clarity, clearer expectations. Where are we spending our time? Where do we want to be spending our time that we're not spending our time? right. So, wish we had more time. Wish we had more time to stay in this segment, but in the interest of lunch coming up, and the purpose of the activity, though, is it's kind of twofold, maybe more than that. Getting really clear on what are our top functions, our top roles, the expectation, where we need to be spending our time, and then seeing where are we spending our time is really key. So important. And so, depending on where you're at through this, it could be a little bit of lunch conversation. It can be something you follow up with as you continue to build relationships. Hey, Dave, I really like what you said about that time management strategy. Following up with them offline and saying, can you tell me more about that? Leverage, as we become one unified team, as we get to know each other better, grow those relationships, leverage that. But come back to this, because being intentional in this area is important. The second thing is the understanding and the feeling, because we often feel we're on an island by ourselves, is that you are not alone. This struggle of roles and time management and doing the things that are most important to us, that drive the end line on culture, but also the end line on the P&L sheet, there's got to be a balance. And I would tell you, there are times when I'm not doing good on the people side, on that interaction, on being proactive enough. Because of the things that compete with that time that have to get done. We got a grant due. We're working on a comprehensive plan. We're working on this fire here and that fire there. Right? So those things are going to pop up, but being intentional, scheduling those things is so important. A couple observations about this group that is just so impressive. As I walk around and you guys are having conversation, you are dialed in. The body language, you're leaning forward, the head nodding, the engagement, the true interest in each other, the energy is absolutely phenomenal. So I want to commend you guys on that. And then I want to apologize to the front row team, because as we worked through our last activity on the best leader we've ever had, and they were as a team, I was thinking about these guys are just nailing it. They're all pitching in. I forgot them when we reported out. And I'm really, really sorry about that. Thank you. Gonna break my kneecaps over lunch. I got it. I got to be careful. I don't know if people know this or not, but Roy was the top leader in the state police SWAT team for a lot of years. And so I don't want to be upsetting him, especially with them this close. So am I. Okay. So let's just talk high level, and we're going to go to lunch, about some time management strategies and some of the struggles that you face as senior leaders. Right? We have conflicting priorities. Anybody here, can you go into your office on site and get 20 minutes uninterrupted? It's impossible. Okay, you can. We're going to figure out how you do that. His door is open, he's in the office, but he's got a big sign that says, don't even think about it, stay out, right? Meeting overload, decision fatigue, and then energy management. So this meeting overload, it can become a culture issue. I know we've streamlined some meetings within the collections team. Is this meeting a good thing or is it the right thing? And that's a level one of my mentors taught me as I'm picking where I'm choosing my time. Is it a good thing? Is it a right thing? If there's meeting overload, how are these meetings being ran? Is there a clear agenda? Is there a clear purpose? Do we have time frames listed on the agenda for how long we're going to spend? Do we stay on track? Do we just schedule meetings for an hour just because that's what we do? Or do we schedule them for 25 minutes or 35 minutes or 45 minutes? These are things that you can do within your team to get some of that time back. Because if we sit down and we set the expectation, the goal, the objective, if we send out the agenda and the challenge or the information beforehand and people can absorb it, we can be ready to show up and say hi and exchange pleasantries and do the things we want to do, but we can be ready to get to work, and then we set the expectation, okay, we have 25 minutes. When you start scheduling meetings for 25 or 35 minutes, people are like, oh, what's going on there? Right? And there's some things, you know, when the boss calls a meeting and you show up and it takes the whole afternoon, there's some things you can't do anything about, but hopefully we've got enough decision makers in this room that we can start to impact that. Because a lot of time is wasted right here. And then you end up the entire night, right, from like 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. doing emails. Anybody do that? All right. So some of the core principles, right? What's urgent versus what's important? How do we get away from the tiredness of the urgency? What is creating? Take a deeper dive. What is creating the urgency? Right? Poor planning on other people's part doesn't create an emergency for us. You know, unless it's the CEO, and then it does, right? But how do we have those conversations? As we move through and create culture, how do we build relationships to where we can come in, regardless if you're the boss or if you're on our team, you're at a place to have a real conversation about things like this. Effectiveness. When are you most effective? When do you have your best energy? For me, it's in the morning. Once I get past 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and I need to be creative, I need to write, I need to think through and process big decisions, right? It becomes a little more difficult to do. So when is your optimal time? When do you have the best energy? When are you the most motivated, creative? And how can you take your more important tasks in time block and put those in to those areas? One of the things that I had to do, because I know by the afternoon I'm just not as sharp and as good. I mean, you guys are going to be really bored this afternoon, I'm telling you right now. No, but in the afternoon I'm just not as creative or sharp. So what I started doing was either working from home and time blocking from the time I dropped Theo off to daycare from like 8 to maybe even 9:30, maybe 10, depending on what I had going on. In the summer, when I don't have to take him to daycare, I might time block from 7 to 9 a.m. or 6 to 10 a.m., whatever it is that I need, but time block that and do it in a place where there aren't interruptions. So I'll go a place, Coffee Crush. It's like Starbucks on steroids. It's a great place in town. I'll sit upstairs. I love the vibe. The music they play just kind of gets my mind in the right place. It's okay to do these things. It's okay to do these kinds of things. You know, we look at, when do we check emails? Are we batching those things, or when our phone goes off, do we check them all day? I set an expectation with our team that if you need me, if it's something important, text me, call me. If you send me an email, it's something longer, text me, let me know it's there. I'm not a master of time management by any means. I'm certainly not a master of time management. But I do know it's important if we're going to change up and change our flow and change how we do things, it's important for us to communicate that with our team members. Delegation. At what percentage does your team member have to be able to do the job as good as you? Like, what percentage of the job can they do as good as you can do before you're willing to delegate? Anybody listen to the time management segment? 50%, right? And you got to decide, what's the risk? What's the liability? Could somebody be harmed? Is this a project that has to be reported out to the C-suite? You've got to decide, right? But great leaders are great multipliers. And delegation is an incredible way to be a multiplier. What stops us from delegating? Trust. What else?
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure. What else? Control. Does anybody, one of the things that stopped me from delegating was I felt like I was dumping on other people. Has anybody ever felt like that? Like, I don't want to delegate this. I don't want to push it off on somebody else. And a shift had happened some point through my journey, and a mentor pointed out to me, Danny, when you don't delegate, you don't let your people grow. And I don't know there's a magic number on like what, like they can do this job 50% or 70% as good as I could do it. I don't know if there's a magic number, but it's your comfort level that they can. You give the responsibility and the authority, you put up the boundaries, the guardrails, you set the expectations to it. But I would be willing to bet that all of us could increase our delegation. And the higher up you move to the organization, the more that we need to delegate. Or what, 20, 30%? Maybe some people more? Because when we think about our role and responsibility, the higher we go in the organization, that's not good, all right. The higher, so all right, let me draw this out. All right. The higher we go in the organization, and not because we're better than anybody, it's because that's what our role is, the more we've got to spend time at 10,000, 20,000, and 30,000 feet. But what happens to us as leaders is that we end up down here at the ground level in the fires. We get drawn in to the fires. And all of you is upper management, right? In the C-suite, approaching the C-suite. The more we head there, we've got to get better at staying at 20 or 30,000 square feet, at only dipping into the 5,000 foot and below. It's not that we're too good to do it, but as you look at your matrix, how much time are you spending up here? How much time are you spending down here? The job as we move through the organization is to have vision, to develop others, to set policy, to push and drive innovation, to get out and build those relationships, build those other leaders. Well, how can we do that if we're constantly in the day-to-day fires between 5,000 and 0 feet? So go back, look at that matrix. And I would tell each of you, while the CEO is up here, all right, I would challenge each of you at the levels that you're at and the titles that you have, and I'd ask you the question, what is your 30,000 feet? What is your 30,000 feet? What are the core reasons your role, your leadership role exists? And how much time are you spending there? And what strategies and techniques can you use to be there more often? Delegation, time blocking, pre-planning, all those things are really important. There's a cool little thing that I got, and we're going to break for lunch. We are running a little behind. So I'll throw these things out and see if they resonate with you, because they've really helped me. Never touch things twice. When you grab something, when you bring it in, right? How many of us have this stack of to-do? And even if you gotta touch it 1.5 times, how can you take those types of things and put them to where you can batch them and work through them? Right? Because when we begin touching things 2 and 3 and 4 times, that's how our desk looks like an absolute disaster. It's like, anybody here got that office that your desk is an absolute mess, and you're like, oh, I know it's a mess, but I know right where it is. Give me a second. That used to be my desk, and at high-level ADHD that I have, that didn't work too well. Get ready for tomorrow before we leave today. Set your priorities. What are those priorities? Make your list. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll be making my list and I already got something done. I'll write it down just so I can cross it off. It helps with that feeling of burnout and overload. Eat frogs. So eat frogs means the things that you're not looking forward to doing or the things that are most important, schedule those and get them done. How many people here have something they're just disinterested, don't want to do, but it's actually important to get moved across the line? It's been sitting and sitting, we keep kicking it further and further down the road. That's energy draining because it's weighing over the top of us. Fight the tyranny of urgency. Stick to your schedule during meetings. Say no. I want to challenge everybody to deeply reflect on what my mentor told me. Is it a good thing or is it the right thing? There's a difference. There can be hundreds of good things for me to be involved in, but I will never sleep and I will never see my family and I will never get the most important things done. How can we delegate some of those things to our team members and give them growth opportunities? Don't multitask. Men especially. We're terrible at multitasking. Next thing you know, you're multitasking 2 things, now it's 3, now it's 4, now it's 5, and now you're more buried than you ever were. Get off the grid, we talked about that, delegate, and how can we put technology to work for us? So I've had this card laminated for 15 years. And when I stick to it and I work through it, I'm much better with my time. And the clearer I am on what the priorities are, and I just have to give myself grace and say, you know what? The things in the bottom right corner may just never get done. They may just never get done. All right, let's take lunch. We're going to take 45 minutes. We're going to come back at 1:30, decompress, walk around, get lunch, check your stuff.